not all hell's broken loose, but a lot of things are already changing, Rachel, even from yesterday with whatever they're doing with NIL and collectives. How you doing? Thank you very much for your time.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So what did yesterday? What happened? What does that actually mean to the collectives?
To be determined. I think that the new governing bodies of college sports are still trying to sort out what collectives can and can't do. I think the initial intent among many crafting the new rules was to basically shut them down. And I think what we're seeing is that is legally problematic, probably, especially given, as you guys probably saw, how incredibly popular they were. I mean, more than $1 billion was given through collectives last year alone, this past school year. And so thinking about trying to shut that all down is going to be problematic.
You said in the article, it was one thing I know about rich people is that they're going to get their way, right? Or they're going to find a way to do what they want to do. And that's very true. The other thing I could not wrap my brain around is the term legitimate business purpose when it came to NIL Go. And so some of those rich people will tell you whatever I'm doing, if it's my choice, is a legitimate business purpose, as long as it falls within the laws of these United States. So I never understood that, and I kind of felt that would undo it. What were your thoughts when you read that?
Well, in fact, that is what is still being haggled over right now. What does that phrase mean? It's open to a lot of interpretation. And so I think, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. What a lot of people saw is, as I wrote in the story, college boosters used to be seen as pariahs, right? I mean, they would get programs in trouble in attempts to pay players or, give them sort of like lightweight jobs as a way to pay them and so on. Collectives really legitimized those donations. They were the way for the first time that college fans could really essentially pay players legitimately. I mean, there's a little more to it than that. Often they would do charity work or promotional work. But, the collectives were an attempt to sort of standardize that kind of thing because pay for play is still technically banned, even though some people would say what's happening now with revenue sharing is pretty much pay for play. That's technically still banned. And so, that's going to be one of the really interesting things about trying to essentially put the toothpaste back in the tube with a lot of boosters, because I think they really enjoyed that they could have such an impact on their teams. And even, down to the fans who gave, $10 a month or whatever it was, they could give in a way that was very direct and felt, I think, pretty meaningful to a lot of people.
Rachel, so with yesterday's ruling, I saw the AD at Pacific. He was upset because it's almost like written and reported this way. There was the 4 power conferences that had been doing this with Matt Baker and all this other stuff. It's like they're paying the same amount of money when it comes to this settlement, all of the billions or whatever it is, and yet they really aren't even in the room, are they?
You're absolutely right in that the power conferences have more power than they ever have before, and there are a number of reasons for that. But the biggest reason is they control the football television money, and as a lot of people still don't understand that the NCAA lost control of selling college football TV rights in the 80s, so they don't get any money from college football television. That goes to the conferences. So with the NCAA basketball tournaments, for instance, that money comes through the NCAA, and then they, through all these formulas, distribute some of it, a lot of it, to schools and conferences. So they at least control that, and they fund a lot of their operations that way through the men's basketball tournament. Imagine how different the NCAA might be if it had held onto control of selling college football broadcast rights. But now we're living in a world where the conferences control those incredibly valuable assets. And because they do, and because those have become so much more valuable, they really increasingly are using that power to call the shots about everything that happens.
What do you know about NIL Go and its functionality that would be reportable or explain it to anyone? Have you been able to uncover anything about that? Because we were at Big 12 Media Days 2 weeks ago, and all the coaches were like, I have no idea what NIL, like what it does. Part of me would be tempted to just make a deal with someone and submit it just so I could see it.
Well, I mean, in very basic terms, now, of course, college athletic departments can share up to $20.5 million in their own revenues with athletes. So anything that flows to athletes, college athletes, that comes outside of that has to go through this clearinghouse, from what I understand. So everything from, Cooper Flagg getting his deal with New Balance, that has to go through. I'm guessing that would pass with no problem, to someone who gets a deal from a booster collective. And, the athlete would have to submit that and say, okay, this is what the deal is for. This is how much it is. And this is what I have to do in return. And that's where the rubber really meets the road. And NIL Go, the people who run that, have to determine, okay, is this, as you said before, a valid business purpose? Is this, commensurate with what other athletes in similar situations are making? And that gets very murky very quickly. And so that is essentially what's being hashed out right now. But that's why it's so confusing. The other thing that's confusing about this is, from what I understand, is really on athletes and to some extent their agents to submit these things. If you think about how busy athletes already are with, preseason camp, studies, et cetera, I mean, that's another thing on their plate that they've never had to do before, that was rolled out very recently. And so that's another level of complication. I know some people on campuses are concerned that athletes, don't know how to do this or will procrastinate, which could potentially put them at risk of some kind of sanction.
So I saw this note from Ross Dellinger earlier today. On a potentially historic day on Capitol Hill, when all-encompassing college sports bill could advance out of the committee, two Democrats reintroducing a bill that would permit what many in the industry crave: collective bargaining with athletes. Is that ever going to happen? And is there more momentum about that now than ever before?
I think there is more momentum. If it's enough to pass a bill, that's a great question. Many of these bills, I should remind listeners and viewers, have been proposed before and they pretty much all failed. And I think there are many more people now, including, I think, the AD at Tennessee, who have said, look, collective bargaining is the only way forward, because it doesn't look like Congress is necessarily going to grant an antitrust exemption, which would essentially let college sports leaders make, the rules they want to make without fear of being sued. But aside from that, generally in our country, you can't just simply cap earnings in an entire industry without collectively bargaining with players. It just is not, it's just a very difficult argument to make legally. And so, some people say that's the only way forward. As we've seen in the past, the NCAA and other college sports leaders, many of them are fighting that, because it's a whole new era of further complication and difficulty. But I don't really know. I mean, I think we're probably facing more lawsuits. Unless there's an antitrust exemption, we're facing more lawsuits if we don't have collective bargaining, because it's just too legally perilous.
Isn't that what the House settlement was supposed to help solve? Was less lawsuits? It has created as many, if not more.
It was, although I think they were also passing it with their fingers crossed, well, if we can get an antitrust exemption, this would really be a slam dunk, which it might be, because antitrust exemptions let leagues do a number of things they otherwise couldn't do legally. Mm-hmm. So, but I just have my doubt. I mean, it's never been passed before, and there's a number of people who are very against it, because they would see it as clawing back some rights that athletes have won over those many years of lawsuits. So, and let's face it. I mean, college football, particularly college basketball, I would say, a number of college sports, much more closely resemble professional sports than they ever have, and capping the compensation of only one group in that whole enterprise, athletes, seems pretty dubious, if you ask me. We don't cap coaches' earnings. We don't cap AD's earnings. Only athletes are having to go through this sort of, the NIL Go, and, their revenue sharing is capped and so on. It's only athletes whose earnings are limited in some way.
Rachel, the SCORE Act advanced out of committee. Every Democrat voted against it and one Republican. So it's not going to, whenever it does get to the floor, if I don't know if Congress is going away or staying now. There's a lot of weird stuff going on that has nothing to do with this, obviously, there. But if they do wind up leaving, which who knows, say it comes to the floor in September, October. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be easy in the Senate. What do you think the real chances it has of actually getting through, given that we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow at the highest levels of government?
I think it's still going to be a challenge. You know, as you mentioned, most if not all Democrats are against it, and one Republican at least. So, and you know, it's hard to speculate because the news cycle, I'm sure you've noticed, moves extremely quickly. So I think in the short term, more likely is the College Sports Commission, which is essentially serving as the policing body for major college sports right now, not, you know, on these issues, on player compensation issues. They need to come to some agreement with the House lawyers about collectives because there's a ton of money at stake. And so they need to hash something. And despite the reporting yesterday, you know, people have said in the wake of that report that, you know, we haven't really finalized things yet. We have not hammered out exactly what the new path forward is with collectives. So there's still some negotiating being done.